Welcome back to another episode of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Sean Ennis. I'm joined by my co-host today, David, and we're talking about something that I am a big believer of, is that people are looking for solutions to their productivity, not to AI. AI is an enabler. What people are looking for is productivity as a service. And David, it seems like you and me have both been doing this more recently, but working with founders, working with colleagues to build more productivity solutions with AI. And I believe you have an example of what you've done today. So I'll hand it over to you, David. Take us through your thoughts and what you have done and what you've been able to accomplish with this new product.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the things that Sean and I are going to show you today, as well as into the future, is we don't want to just talk about the transformation. We're doing things and sharing our projects and our love, our passion, our pain, things that we've come up against. And today is a good illustration of us kind of showing you the fruits of the labor, and not just speaking to speak, but actually putting all of this into action. And so one of the things that I had built for this example today is I've tapped into my 12, 13 years of experience in the legal industry. I worked for a software company that sold into a lot of these AM law or legal firms, the largest law firms globally. And within that space, there's also Fortune 100 and 500 companies that have either small to large legal teams, depending on the nature of the business or whatever it is that they do. So having spent all of that time in that industry and seeing and understanding a problem, I created a product and priced it accordingly so that it's not your traditional SaaS, but it's focused is all around productivity as a service. And so we're trying to leverage AI in a very calculated and a very measured way. Now, that doesn't mean that my approach is 100%, but I'm hoping that not only will you at least maybe be able to pick something out of the approach or the strategy, it will maybe spark your own creativity or spark the things that's going on in your business or problems that you're trying to solve. There are productivity gains to be had everywhere. As everything gets dismantled, AI replaces everything. But all too often, Sean keeps seeing this, and we keep talking about it time and time again. Companies are just throwing caution to the wind and going all in, either firing people or turning AI loose on large, massive corporations, creating chaos in the news cycles. You can read all about it. The news is absolutely full of it. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is to walk through this particular use case where we're talking about 18.5 billion spent every year on humans reading contracts word for word. So the problem statement is that when you're in business, you have contracts. Either they're coming in because you need to sign a contract to engage with somebody else, or you need to engage as on the sales side and your customer has to receive your documentation or contracts. The bottom line is people need to go through, and people, I mean your legal teams need to go through and either review this against whatever is considered standard in the industry and or apply what those standards might mean for you as a company or for that company from that perspective or from that lens. And so that takes time. It is a lot of time, too much time. And so there's a lot of time to be saved in all of that. And so if we kind of go through, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the slides. I want to actually show you the product itself. These numbers do matter. 80% of the time is spent dealing with these types of things in the review and the iterations of these contracts. The average one will have about 60 clauses. Now, a clause is like an area or a section pertaining to a particular legal speak, depending on what the agreement may or might be. And I'm trying to not get too legal or technical because I'm trying to keep this broad enough for the main audience. But the bottom line is there's a lot of back and forth before you can get to a resolution. Now, if you look on the attorney side, if you look at these AM law firms I was telling you about today, and now this varies, so this is subject to argument, of course, but the average starting salary of an associate coming out of college, joining a law firm today, is about $225,000. On the lower end, it could be $175,000. On a higher end, maybe $275,000. But bottom line, that's a lot of money to be making fresh out of college, just starting. And so while it's good for the employee or the associate, don't think that the senior partners aren't looking at ways of, again, we've seen this in the news cycle, is cutting that loss. And so they're looking at all different ways of handling this. And this software, this tool, might be seen through that negative lens. But instead of looking at it that way, think about it in terms of this is a problem. This is a problem at scale. Now, how can we get more business and do more with less? And so you use AI in a very surgical, precision way. Now, I'm going to try to pull up my screen here to share my desktop where I have the public website version of this. So this is the advertising front end of this. And so it's really mainly focused around, again, AM law firms, or if you're a in-house legal team in a Fortune 100, 500 company, you're going to have to go through a series of process. So typically what you'll do is you'll read the document, you'll make any changes with Word, track changes, you'll put it into SharePoint. If you're a Fortune 100, 500, maybe you have a document management system. If you're a legal company, you definitely have a document management system, meaning a law firm. And so you'll do whatever you're going to do into the documents. You'll upload them. Now, mentally, you'll classify them as a human being, and then you'll make your notes, your comments, your memorandums. And so you've done this like boilerplate a gazillion times, so you know exactly what to look for. And all of those standards are trapped into your head. Now, what happens when you have an associate that's a rock star in, say, an NDA or an MSA or whatever it might be? And then you have another associate that comes in and their area of expertise is maybe somewhere else. How do you leverage that knowledge or flatten the knowledge zone on that? And so this is where a tool like this using AI can come in. And so AI is really good at classifying piece by piece these types of documents. And so this is an example of surgical precision using AI with a very specific intent, and not just giving it some huge, wide open playground to go and play with. And so then it goes and it analyzes all of that. And then after the analysis, things get flagged for review. And I can't stress this is enough. We see people throwing the baby out with the bathwater, meaning either all of the employees or just throwing a process in the trash can, and just radical changes, too quick, too fast. And so keeping humans in the loop, at least for the next couple of years before you make these major changes, is highly advisable. Not only will it quell the fear that's in your organization, it will also line you up and future-proof you much better, because you won't be scrambling for all of the loss of knowledge that's in your company as you may try to downsize. And I get that sometimes it's unavoidable, especially if you're a publicly held company. You know, the quickest way to recover your expenses, while employees are your biggest asset, they're also one of your biggest expenses. So, you know, there's that double-edged sword to all of that. Anyway, continuing along at the process, you generate the output that needs to be particularly fixed, and then you track whatever obligations that you have to do with that contract downstream to make sure that you don't breach the contract, because you have to follow up with X by X date, so on and so forth. We talked about countless revisions, and so revisions continue to happen. But mainly, you want to carry the intelligence forward to make sure that the AI needs to be able to learn on itself, as well as the people, the humans that are still into the loop of all of that. And then this only pertains to legal law firms. This will make a lot of sense. Large law firms typically, not always, but can represent both the plaintiff and the defendant. So it's one law firm fighting literally against itself internally. It's a very unique situation. It usually is only in the AmLaw 100s. Typically, it's a law firm A against law firm B, and each one represents both of the parties. But ethical walls are huge to help accomplish any of that. So at a high level, Sean, you have any feedback about, you know, the typical contract or ingestion process, maybe not from the legal standpoint, but some of the pain that you've witnessed over the last couple of years as it relates to just having to either create an SOW and making sure that the SOW is in somewhat of alignment with the master services agreement. We've both worked at a company that had both of these previously. Wrangling all that, making sure that everything is in lockstep. It's an arduous process, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of times people see their legal team as the DMV, right? The salespeople will be scared of bringing anything to legal because it immediately injects 2-3 weeks into the process. Part of where I believe the opportunities with AI is to make us all more agile, not by running agile, but by true agility. That's what AI is all about. So when it comes down to things like this, it shows what is possible. And just think of how many deals are lost because they got too slow because of salespeople, right? The salespeople needing help from their contracts team, where if you were to be able to give this as a basic check and then the wonderful legal team can review it a lot quicker. Just think of the difference you have in revenue generation at that point. Number two, think about if you're an individual practitioner in the legal space, of how much time you could spend on the golf course versus sitting at your computer reading the same terms over and over and over again. Think about the risk aversion of being able to pass this through so that you could say, hey, there's so many things changed, I'm just going to reject it, versus taking an hour to come to that conclusion. There's plenty of reason to use AI for productivity. And this legal, the way you're explaining it is exactly up that alley. I cannot understand why more people are not embracing this. But I think the problem is AI is being weaponized by other departments to say, okay, you're going to use AI. We're going to require you to use AI, so we don't need you.
Yep.
Whereas if a legal team says, hey, we can use this and we can get the advantages of it and move quicker and be more resilient, I would rather have my legal team doing nothing all day and being able to execute at a high level and low latency with this tool than having them billing 80 hours a week, right? Just looking at the same documents over and over again. The reduced risk of errors. I mean, again, I know lawyers like to say that they don't make mistakes, but they make mistakes.
Yes.
This could really help do that as well. So there's so many reasons to use technology to enable job roles like this. And I'm just stunned why people aren't embracing this more. I know, David, this came in through, friendship and family and colleagues and stuff like this. This is what we're here for. If you all have a use case like this and you really want to help explore it, me and David are the people you could talk to about it.
Yep. That's everything you just said times 10. And this really did come from solving a problem. Somebody had mentioned that they had a problem and how could, this potentially be solved. And so this was able to be put together in as little as 3 weeks. And so I did this single-handedly. It's not to brag on me. It's just to say that I understood the problem from end to end and had the experience. But I want you to think that this is like a unicorn situation as well, and not everybody is geared or necessarily wired that way. It's an exception rather than the rule. But you do have people in your company that can come together as a team, and they should be like the context think tank where all of these expertise come together, and then the people that do the orchestration with the AI. But the main point of all of this is to avoid the monotony, to avoid the mistakes. I want to take you over to this Why Us page, but I want to scroll down to how we stack up. Now, this is almost laughable because this is a unique piece of software. It was never meant to compete against the competition because the competition provides a box. And today's software as a service, Sean and I are kind of on the kick saying, is this dead? Is that dead? I did an article on low code. We just did a previous show about agile. Everything is getting torn up. And so software as a service is another one of these things. Look at the tick boxes that are completely unique feature-wise. And some of these, contract clause management, contract management systems that are out there, I'm not trying to compete with them. I just tried to create something to solve a problem. And as a result, it's a unique thing that kind of stands on its own. But from a relational standpoint, people need to understand what else is out there, what is possibly similar. And so there's a lot of opportunity, as you can see from this graph, about what's going on. So this is the one point from the graph. The other thing I want to show you is the documentation. If you saw our last show, we talked about documentation. This is the documentation for both the implementation, for the deployment, the operations, but I wanted to bring your attention to this to show you the architecture. And knowing that law firms are what they are, Fortune 100 companies, 500 companies, when they're this size, you need scale sets, scalability. You need to be able to expand, and you need to make sure that the architecture will support this. We've got 4 different components to it. A piece of it that works the front end of the website, another piece that does all of the logic and the back end processing. There's this concept of a worker. It's like think about somebody coming through as orchestrating a queue, or somebody that manually flips on and off the traffic light, like a cop would do if the traffic light were to go out. You've got a database that handles all of this information, and it's not just any database. It's got the vector switch turned on it, so you can do the thing heard of called RAG. This allows you to have conversations with your documents. And then this other database is called Redis. It's just something else that kind of helps to keep all of this stuff together. So if we log into this thing to kind of see what this might look like, I'm going to show you the projects of a couple of them that we have here. Under this one, we don't have any docs. I'll go to let's see here, under Apple, I've got 5 documents. And let's look at maybe a standard NDA. So I've already uploaded this document. You can upload the document by simply just dragging and dropping it. It goes through a process of ingestion, and I can show you that. It's nothing exciting to see, but you can actually watch it move through the steps. It all happens in about under 5 minutes, and then you get a result set that looks something like this. You get a summary telling you whether or not the contract has some high-risk exposure, so you immediately know the level of or the degree of what's going on. In the executive summary, it gives you an overview. You have a little bit of information about the risk assessment. Now, I want you to keep in mind, an attorney does most of this inside of their head. And so having to deal with hundreds of these contracts is huge. And so looking at the recommendations of what might be going on within the contract, these are the really 50,000-foot view high level. But if you get into the contract data, this is extracting the information out of the contract. We have a notice period. There's terms and renewal. How do you handle dispute resolution? So if you have a quick question about a very particular area within the contract, you can get right into it. What if you're in a negotiation situation over the contract? These are things that you should be looking at based on the standards or based on your position as a company. I'm going to use this as a segue to digress very quickly. We have a feature in here called Playbook. Now, what the playbook does is it allows you as a company, an organization, or a law firm to say, how does your legal department normally operate? How do you handle terms and conditions? How do you define these types of things? What are your standard positions on certain clauses? And what level of risk are you willing to take for certain clauses based on situations or things that may come up with. Maybe you have a very particular way that you handle clauses or that you want to see them written in your contracts and agreements, whether you're issuing them or you're accepting them as a signator. The other thing is any regulatory context that you may specialize in or that you may be subjected to because of the nature of your business. And now you have all of these flexible tags that you can do by contract types, arbitration, jurisdiction, as well as practice areas and any type of tax terminology and things of that nature. Those are all fully and highly customizable. So hopefully you can start to see where we're going with this type of analysis. And if we get into the actual clause analysis, you can spin this open. And let me scroll down a little bit so you can actually see what's going on. And this one is a negotiable risk. And it tells you what the contract says here. And then this gives you an understanding of what the standard position is. Now, if you had done anything with the playbook, you'll already know from the contracts that this is exactly where you should be looking and what does it mean. And down here you have deviation and business impact, and it'll tell you what the deviation is in the contract and what the impact to your business are. And then, of course, it gives you an accepted revision. You can edit the revision. And once again, you have AI that can help you draft based on all of this context going into it, and it can just rewrite it and the attorney can approve it or tweak it ever so slightly. And now you have a red line when it's all said and done. You have what was originally versus what's going on. If you come over to the benchmark revisions, you don't see any red lines here. But if we go back and we look at another document that has multiple versions, you can see up here at the top right, there's version 1, version 2. If we go over to benchmarks, we do have a red line version. And if you look at the red line for it, you've seen this a million times in your contracts where you can see what's been added, what's been removed. And so a lot of the heavy lifting is already done where AI is in your workflow process. And that's what this problem is that we were trying to solve, making sure that that process is as fluidic and painful as possible. And so that you can do these large scale of contracts in volume and not overburden your legal staff or have to grow your legal staff. You can keep the staff that you have, but you can just make them more efficient. And now you've got some guardrails, some governance around all of that. Monotony is a really terrible thing in the law firm and legal departments. They're always looking for a template. They're always looking for a standard way of doing it. And occasionally they have to just go in and muscle that law really by hand, usually hand it off to a paralegal, and then they draft it till it gets done. But nonetheless, if you're not into contracts and anything, I want you to take away this, because this is about productivity as a service to kind of bring this all back. It is about using AI to develop tools, to develop products, to take the 800-pound gorillas in the world that offer said stuff off of the shelf and build your own. And your teams can knock stuff out like this in weeks, maybe a month or two, and you're ready to rock and roll. If you're not sure how to do that, this is where Sean and I are sitting on standby, literally waiting to help you to solve these types of problems. Sean, do you have anything else to add along the lines of just generally AI and problems that you're solving and maybe even kind of what you're working on? And I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to show something that you're working on too. And how do these two approaches kind of work together in tandem to solve problems that anybody might be having right now?
Yeah, I'm working with a group of people that basically what they're doing is they're applying this in the telco sense. And very interested in being able to show you what they're doing, helping operations center in telcos become more efficient. Some of my background is in that area, and that's why I'm working with those founders. But I really make the call out to anybody and everybody. If you've got a business problem that you cannot afford to fix, you should probably talk to us, because AI can probably help you fix it. And that is what I am telling everybody. They're like, Sean, if we keep using AI, we're not going to need anybody in tech anymore. And I'm like, no, the business problems that can be solved with technology is an inexhaustible demand. What turns people off on tech is trying to create moats, trying to create fortresses, telling people what to do, that it's not your business, it's their business, right? If we become a little bit more consultative and talk to business leaders about business problems and meet them where they are, instead of forcing them to learn AI, we learn their business. That is where the opportunity exists. And I can tell you, my calendar is full of people that I talk to regularly who are trying to solve business problems with technology. They just don't want to use technology in their business. It's a different set of priorities, right? If you say, I want to solve my business problems with technology, you get people to sign up. If you say, your business needs to use my technology, you're going to get a thank you very much for your time and never respond to your contact invite anymore. So, I think the shine is off of tech right now, and it behooves everybody to have a little bit more humility and meet business leaders where they're at. And that would be my recommendation for all of us. Exercise a little bit more empathy and humility. We're all here trying to solve business problems.
Yep. No, well said. I couldn't have said it any better than myself. I think a lot of times too, people would need to understand that everybody is trying to do more with less and lower costs. And so the quickest way to lower costs is to increase your revenue. And so AI, and that's a business problem. Everybody's having it right now. And a lot of the intake process, and not to steal Sean's thunder, he's working on something secretly to that end. But Sean's going to show something in a couple of weeks with regards to solving that problem. Obviously, today, this was a very niche specific, but I wanted to get it in front of you so that you could see a very surgically precise type of AI, a very specific problem that it's trying to solve, and how it's impacting software as a service to solve these problems. And so the good news is, if you're looking to save money, look at your software as a service subscriptions that you currently have and to see, hey, what can we own internally and not have to pay the licensing fees for, rather than let all that staff go in the IT department? Maybe they can take on more responsibility. You can send them off on making sure that they understand how to use AI, hire Sean and I to teach them how to use AI, or at any point in time, hire us to bring us in to have conversations about what is possible. Where do you start? Because that's probably the first questions that we always wind up answering for people is, where do I start? And the first thing is, tell me what you're working on that's important. What are you working on this year that is critical? And what is the big focus in the next 90 days? And then obviously we try to help you find some low-hanging fruit. This earns trust. This also accelerates whatever it is that you're going to do, allows time for the process to organically unfold. And that, a lot of times, seeing is believing. And I see it time and time again. Sean and I have both seen this. People try to come in and they try to boil the ocean. And that is to say that they take on too much. There's too many people involved. There's too long to ramp up. There's no thought about measurability, because if you're not measuring it and you don't know where you are today from a cost and times perspective, it doesn't matter what Sean and I help you with. It doesn't matter what you help yourself with on your own or with another consultancy or another company. If you fail to measure it, you're not going to be able to prove your ROI, and you're right back to where you started before at the end of the day there. But anyway, that's my soapbox for today. Sean, anything else to add?
No, just want to make sure everybody knows to reach out, look at the website, and we have spent a lot of time making sure that all of our contact information is there for to reach out and schedule some time to talk to us. This is where I'm spending the majority of my time right now, is talking to the founders, the transformational leaders out there, and seeing what they're doing and how they can be better focused on creating better outcomes and always interested in collaborating. We're going to share as many people who want to share. Like David was saying, we're inviting a lot of people who we know, who are founders, who are leaders, to come and share their experience, what they're doing. A lot of people are resonating with the information that we're sharing here, and definitely want to call out and see how we can work together.
We've got our contact form here at the bottom that you can fill that out. That goes to both Sean and I. On your screen, you have the URL on the screen. It will take you directly to the site. If you got a phone and you're watching this on your phone or your mobile, you can go ahead and scan that QR code, and that'll also give you a quick shortcut on how to get there. And all of the episodes or past episodes are right here online. Talking about the last show that we had shown here is the human method. We had a great conversation with Megan Bond, and she has a company and a focused effort around the human method. Really great interview. If you haven't checked that out, make sure to check that out as well. But we're here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And that's all the time that we have for you today. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.